The stars had been quiet for 73 years. The great treaty between humanity and the Valdorian Empire had held strong, keeping peace across hundreds of worlds. Ambassador Daniel Carter had spent 30 years of his life making sure that peace survived. He was 52 years old now, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many close calls and difficult negotiations. Daniel stood on the observation deck of his diplomatic ship, the horizon's edge, watching the purple and gold colors of a distant nebula. His aide, a young woman named Catherine Walsh, walked up behind him with a worried look on her face. "Sir, we have a problem," she said. "The Valdorian High Council wants you on their capital world within 48 hours. They did not say why. Daniel felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The Valdorians never called emergency meetings. They were a proud species, with 4 eyes and scaled skin, and they followed strict rules about everything. Something was very wrong. "What do our intelligence people say?" Daniel asked. "They have seen strange fleet movements near our border colonies. Hundreds of warships moving into position. The journey to Valder Prime took 36 hours. Daniel spent every minute reading old files and trying to understand what was happening. When his ship came out of hyperspace near the Valdorian homeworld, his worst fears became real. An armada of warships surrounded the planet. Not defense ships. These were conquest formations, the kind the Valdorians used when they planned to take new territory by force. "Get me a channel to Earth Command," Daniel ordered. "Priority Alpha. And prepare my shuttle." The High Council chamber was designed to make visitors feel small and weak. Black stone columns rose up into darkness, and 7 Valdorian counselors sat on high thrones at the far end of the room. Daniel walked the long path alone, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Supreme Counselor Vethrock, the oldest and most powerful of the rulers, waved one clawed hand for Daniel to come closer. Ambassador Carter, the counselor, spoke through a translator device. "You have served as a bridge between our peoples. For this, we give you the kindness of an explanation." Daniel felt his heart beating faster. "I am honored. May I ask what needs to be explained?" Vethrek's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "The treaty between our peoples is finished. As of this moment, the Valdorian Empire claims ownership of the 17 human colony worlds within our zone of expansion." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. 17 worlds. Nearly 4 billion human lives. Supreme Counselor Daniel kept his voice steady with great effort. "This action breaks every agreement we made together. Those colonies were built peacefully, with full approval from both sides." Another counselor, Kethmer, spoke with open disgust. "Humanity always talks about agreements. Words on documents. Deals made when your species was young and we were curious about you. That time has ended." "Ah!" Daniel's hands shook behind his back. "May I ask what caused this decision?" Vethrock leaned forward on his throne. "Your species has too many children too quickly. You've spread too fast. In 73 years, you have grown from 12 colonies to 147. Your population has grown 6 times larger. The galaxy has limits, Ambassador. The Valdorian Empire will not be pushed aside by creatures who live barely a century." "We have always respected the borders," Daniel replied. "Every new colony was approved through proper channels. Channels we now close." Vethrak waved his hand, as if brushing away an insect. "You have 2 standard cycles to move civilians from those worlds. After that, any humans who remain will be subjects of the Empire." Daniel felt something change inside him. The shock faded, replaced by a cold, clear anger he had never felt before. "And if we refuse?" he asked. The Valdorian counselors looked at each other with what might have been amusement. "Your fleet is a small part of ours. Your military technology is acceptable, but nothing special. This is not a discussion, Ambassador. This is a notice." For a long moment, Daniel stood in silence. Then he spoke, and his voice sounded different, even to himself. "I have spent 30 years building peace between our peoples. I have defended your culture to human critics. I have celebrated every step we took toward understanding each other." He stopped and looked directly into Vethrek's 4 eyes. "You have just thrown all of that away." "Your feelings are noted," Vethrak replied. They change nothing. Daniel nodded slowly. Then let me note something too. You see humanity as young, as temporary, as a species that will be absorbed or destroyed in the long history of the galaxy. You have made a terrible mistake, Kethmer laughed, a harsh sound. Threats, Ambassador. From a diplomat? Not threats, Daniel said quietly. Simple truth. You think your armadas make you unbeatable? You think that because we wanted peace, we cannot make war? You look at our short lives and see weakness instead of urgency. His voice grew harder. You do not understand what humans become when everything we love is threatened. Patrick's eyes narrowed. You are dismissed, Ambassador. Tell your government our terms. Daniel turned to leave, then stopped at the door. When he spoke, his words echoed through the huge chamber. Supreme Counselor, I came here as a diplomat, a builder of bridges, a man who believed that understanding could bring different species together. He looked back over his shoulder. You have killed that man today? What remains will be something far less pleasant for your empire. The walk back to his shuttle was the longest of Daniel's life. Catherine met him at the landing area, her face white with fear. Sir, Earth Command is waiting. The President herself wants your report. Daniel climbed into the shuttle without speaking. As the small ship lifted off, he watched the Valdorian capital grow smaller below them. Catherine, he finally said. Yes, sir. Begin writing a formal response to the Valdorian demands. Use this heading, Humanity's Answer. What should the response say, sir? Daniel's eyes reflected the stars as they jumped into hyperspace. That heading will be enough. They will learn what it means soon. In his 30 years of diplomacy, Daniel had always believed that the right words could solve any problem. He had built his entire career on that belief. Now, watching stars blur past the viewport, he understood that some problems could not be solved with words. The Valdorians had made their choice. They had decided that humanity was weak, that 4 billion human lives were acceptable losses in their plan for expansion. They had looked at a species that valued peace and seen prey. They would learn differently. Daniel did not know yet exactly how, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The man who had boarded this ship on Valdor Prime was not the same man who would arrive at Earth. That man, the patient diplomat, the careful negotiator, was dead. What remained was something older, something that humanity had carried since the first human picked up a rock to defend their family, something the Valdorians, with their 10,000 years of easy dominance, had never faced. They had awakened human rage, and they would pay for it. The emergency meeting of the United Earth Parliament lasted 11 hours. Daniel Carter stood before the assembled leaders of humanity, telling them everything that had happened on Valdor Prime. His voice was calm, but everyone could see that something had changed in him. President Margaret Sullivan, a strong woman in her 60s, listened with growing horror. Ambassador Carter, is there any chance we can still talk to them? Find another way? No, Madame President. Daniel's answer was immediate. I know Valdorian culture deeply. This decision came from their military leaders, but the whole council supports it. They believe this is their moment to establish permanent control before humanity grows too large to stop. Admiral Christopher Hayes, commander of Earth's combined fleet, spoke from his seat. Ambassador, your view of our military situation was honest. Our fleet is about 1/8 the size of theirs. We cannot win a normal war. Normal, Daniel repeated the word slowly. Admiral, may I share something I have learned from 30 years among alien species? Of course. Daniel walked to the center of the chamber. Every species we have met measures strength in normal ways. Fleet sizes, weapon power, factory output. These things matter, but they miss something important about humanity. The chamber fell silent as the usually calm diplomat spoke with new fire in his voice. The Valdorians live longer than us. They are physically stronger. They have a warrior culture going back thousands of years, but they have never faced extinction. They have never been pushed to the edge and had to fight their way back. They do not understand what humans become when we have nothing left to lose. Defense Minister Gregory Palmer leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Ambassador? I am suggesting that we stop thinking like diplomats and start thinking like survivors. Daniel turned to face everyone. The Valdorians have given us 48 hours to start moving our people out. They expect us to obey, to give up those worlds to save the rest. And then they will take more, because they will have learned that we can be pushed. The other choice is a war we cannot win, a senator objected. The other choice, Daniel replied, is making war so expensive that they cannot afford to fight it. Not by matching their fleet, but through different methods. Through making every conquered world a nightmare. Through showing that our love of life does not mean we accept death. President Sullivan studied the ambassador carefully. Daniel, you have been humanity's voice for peace for 3 decades. What changed? Daniel's face showed something the assembly had never seen before. A depth of cold determination that changed his whole appearance. Madame President, I spent 30 years believing that understanding could prevent conflict. That if I just found the right words, I could bridge any gap. He stopped. The Valdorians just taught me that some gaps are made on purpose by those who want conflict. You cannot negotiate with someone who sees your existence as the problem. You're calling for total war. I am calling for survival. Walk to a screen showing a map of the 17 threatened worlds. 4 billion of our people live on these planets. Men, women, children, who trusted us to keep them safe. Every deal we make betrays that trust. Every world we give up proves the Valdorians right about our weakness. Admiral Hayes stood. Ambassador, if we fight back with our military, our losses would be terrible. The Valdorian fleet would destroy us in any direct fight. Then we do not fight directly. Daniel turned to face the Admiral. We make them pay for every system, every planet, every city. We arm the civilian populations. We burn what we cannot hold. We make sure that even if they take those worlds, they get only ruins and resistance. The chamber filled with worried voices. These ideas went against humanity's view of itself as the peaceful species. The bridge-builders. President Sullivan raised her hand for quiet. Ambassador Carter, you are suggesting a basic change in how humanity responds to attack. Yes, Madam President. Because the rules have changed, whether we wanted them to or not. The vote happened at midnight. By a margin of 73%, the United Earth Parliament approved the Carter Protocol. Full military preparation of threatened colonies, permission for guerrilla warfare, and the start of research programs long held and reserved. As Daniel left the chamber, Admiral Hayes caught up to him. Ambassador, I have read your full plan. The section about delayed response measures, is that really what you mean? Daniel stopped walking. Admiral, the Valdorians have fleets that can destroy our regular forces. We cannot match them ship for ship. But their civilization is concentrated, their worlds built up over thousands of years. Ours are scattered, young, flexible. You are talking about making this a war that could last centuries. I am talking about making certain that even if they kill us, we take them with us. Daniel's voice carried no emotion, only total certainty. I am talking about results so terrible that no species ever again thinks humanity is an easy target. The first Valdorian ships crossed into human space 18 hours ahead of schedule. They expected little resistance, maybe some diplomatic delays. What they found changed their understanding of humanity forever. The colony of New Helsinki, with 200 million people, had received the order to leave and rejected it. Every man and woman who could hold a weapon had been armed. The planetary defense system, supposedly meant for civilian use, showed military changes that had been installed years ago in secret. When the Valdorian landing forces touched down, they met resistance that shocked their commanders. Human civilians, people who should have been farmers and teachers, fought with a wildness that the warrior-bred Valdorians had never seen. The battle for New Helsinki lasted 3 weeks. The Valdorians won in the end. But they lost 17 times more soldiers than they expected, and the planet they claimed was a burning ruin that would take decades to rebuild. And that was only the beginning. Word spread across human space. The Carter Protocol was not just words on paper, it was a transformation. Humanity, the species that had sought peace, was showing another face. An older face. The face of a species that had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. Daniel watched the reports come in from his office on Earth. Each number told a story of pain and sacrifice. Human casualties mounted. But Valdorian casualties mounted faster. Catherine Walsh brought him the latest figures. "Sir, the Valdorians have requested a ceasefire conference." Daniel did not look up from the reports. Their casualty numbers. Nearly 400,000 military deaths. Twice that wounded. Good. The word came out flat, without joy. They expected a quick victory. Instead, they are bleeding. "Will you attend the conference?" Daniel finally looked at her. His eyes were different now. Harder. Older. Yes, but not as the diplomat they remember. They wanted Ambassador Carter. They killed him on Valder Prime. He stood and looked out at the stars. They will meet someone else now. 6 months had passed since the war began. Ambassador Daniel Carter had become something else entirely. No longer the patient bridge builder, he now served as the designer of humanity's resistance. His knowledge of diplomacy, once used to find common ground, now found weaknesses in Valdorian society to attack. He stood in the war room of Earth Command. Surrounded by glowing displays showing the state of the conflict, 9 of the 17 worlds had fallen. 8 continued to fight. Their people waging a shadow war that made occupation a constant nightmare for the Valdorians. Catherine Walsh, now his chief strategist, reported the news. The Valdorian High Council has asked for a ceasefire meeting. Counselor Kethmer himself will lead their group. Daniel studied the battle maps. "The same Kethmer who laughed at my warning." "Yes, sir. Interesting." Daniel turned from the display. Their people must be asking hard questions about this war. The meeting took place at Crestfall Station. It's the same location where the original peace treaty had been signed 73 years ago. The Valdorians had chosen this place on purpose, hoping to remind humanity of happier times. Kethmer looked different now. His scales were pale, his 4 eyes lacking their old confidence. When Daniel entered the room, the counselor actually seemed nervous. Ambassador Carter Kethmer began. "The Valdorian Empire offers terms for ending this unfortunate conflict." Daniel said nothing. He simply sat and waited. Kethmer continued, clearly unsettled by the silence. "We will accept human control over 12 of the 17 disputed worlds. The remaining 5, already under our power, will join the Empire. People there may leave or stay as protected subjects." No. The single word hung in the air. Kethmer's translator device seemed to stutter as if unsure it had heard correctly. "Ambassador, perhaps you do not understand. We are offering to return worlds we have already conquered. This is unheard of kindness."
Act!
Daniel leaned forward. "Let me explain what happens now, Counselor. Every day this war continues. Humanity's military power grows. We are a young species, remember? We adapt quickly. We learn from every battle. The tactics that surprised you at New Helsinki have been improved and given to every human world. You cannot match our fleet. We do not need to." Daniel's voice remained calm, almost pleasant. "We need only to make the cost of victory higher than you can pay. Your empire is old, stable, rich. Your people have never known true desperation. They are starting to ask why their children die for worlds that give nothing but ashes." Kethmer's scales moved with hidden emotion. "You speak of wearing us down? Such wars destroy both sides." "Yes," Daniel nodded. "But humanity has rebuilt from near destruction before. We pulled ourselves off a single planet, survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed hundreds of millions. We are very good at suffering." He paused. "Can the same be said of your people? You are threatening to destroy us. I am promising consequences." Daniel's voice grew hard. "You broke a treaty that had kept peace for 73 years. You killed the dream that different species could live together as equals. Did you think there would be no price?" The talks continued for 3 days. Each session saw Kethmer offering more, and each session ended with Daniel's flat refusal. Word spread through the Valdorian group that the human ambassador had become something strange, a negotiator who seemed not to want agreement. On the fourth day, Supreme Counselor Vethrok himself arrived. This was something that had never happened in Valdorian history. The ruler of an 800-system empire did not travel for negotiations. He received visitors at home. Ambassador Carter. Vethrok's voice carried ancient authority. I am told you refuse all reasonable terms. I reject insufficient terms, Daniel corrected. There is a difference. State your demands. What will end this war? Daniel stood, walking to the window that showed the stars beyond the station. Complete withdrawal from all human space, payment for civilian deaths, trials for military commanders who ordered crimes against human people. Possible. The Empire does not accept such conditions. Then the war continues. Daniel turned back to face the Supreme Counselor. And I activate systems that your spies have probably already found but hoped were fake. Vethrok's eyes narrowed. The scattered weapons platforms, we have seen their construction. Automatic systems, Daniel confirmed. Placed in deep space near every major Valdorian population center. Set to recognize Valdorian life signs. Designed to activate if human colonies are destroyed or if Earth itself falls. A doomsday system? You would kill billions of innocent people. I would ensure consequences for murder. Daniel's voice carried no heat, no passion, only absolute certainty. Your empire has existed for 10,000 years. You have ruled over dozens of species, absorbed or eliminated all opposition. You have never faced an enemy willing to die to hurt you. You have never calculated the cost of absolute resistance. This is madness. This is humanity. Daniel sat back down. We are very good at building things, at creating, at reaching for stars we cannot yet touch. But we are also very good at destruction, at sacrifice, at choosing death over submission. He leaned forward. You awakened that ability. Now you must deal with it. The silence stretched on. Vethrok, oldest and most powerful of the Valdorian rulers, faced a human diplomat who had changed into something he had no way to understand. If I agree to your terms, Vethrok finally spoke. If the Empire withdraws, pays for damages, gives up commanders for trial. What then? Then humanity remembers that we were once builders of bridges. Daniel's voice softened slightly. My 30 years of work are not forgotten, Supreme Counselor. Only buried. Peace can be rebuilt, but not on fear. On real respect, you would trust us again? No, Daniel shook his head. But I would give the next generation a chance to earn trust. That is more than you offered us. Vethrok stood slowly. His ancient bodies seemed to have aged even more during their talk. Ambassador Carter, you have shown the Valdorian Empire something we have not seen in 10,000 years. An enemy we cannot simply overwhelm. A species that turns our own methods against us with terrible efficiency. I have shown you humanity, Daniel replied. All of it, not just the part that builds bridges. I will take your terms to the full council. I cannot promise they will accept. Then I cannot promise to stop the war. Daniel stood as well. But I will promise this. Every day of delay costs you more. The fire we have lit does not die easily. It spreads. Vethrok nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not respect. Then he left, his guards following silently. Catherine entered after the Valdorians had gone. Sir, how did it go? Daniel looked out at the stars, his face unreadable. We will know soon. Either they accept our terms, or they learn exactly how far humanity will go. And if they refuse? Daniel did not answer for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried absolute conviction. No matter what it costs. The Treaty of Crestfall was signed on the first anniversary of the war's beginning. For the first time in galactic history, younger species had forced an ancient empire to accept terms given to them, not negotiated with them. The news spread across civilized space like fire. 17 worlds returned to humanity. Money flowing to rebuild what was destroyed. Valdorian commanders facing justice for their crimes. The impossible had happened. Daniel Carter watched from Earth as the news broke across every screen and every channel. People celebrated in the streets. Fireworks lit up the sky over 100 worlds. Humanity had won, but Daniel did not celebrate. He sat alone in his quarters, staring at images from the war. Burned cities, mass graves, the faces of children who had died because an empire had decided humanity was disposable. Catherine Walsh found him there, a bottle of drink half empty beside him. "Ambassador, you should be celebrating. We won, did we?" Daniel's voice was hollow. 800 million dead. Worlds that will take generations to rebuild. And something changed in humanity itself. We proved we can be as ruthless as any ancient empire. Catherine sat across from him. We've proved we can survive. At what cost? Daniel gestured to the images on his screen. I designed the resistance plans. I approved the doomsday platforms. I became the thing I spent 30 years fighting against. A man willing to threaten extinction to get what he wanted. You protected our species. I changed our species. Daniel finally looked at her directly. The Valdorians saw us as bridge builders, as diplomats, as a species that valued words over weapons. Now they see us as they see themselves, predators who will burn the galaxy rather than accept defeat. Catherine thought about this carefully. Perhaps they needed to learn that lesson, perhaps. Daniel sighed. But I wonder if we can ever unlearn it ourselves.
Oh.
The months after the treaty brought rebuilding and thinking. Human colonies rose from the ashes. Their populations changed forever by total war. Military spending increased on all human worlds. Never again would the species be caught unprepared. Daniel returned to his work as ambassador, but his job had changed. Where once he had looked for understanding, he now managed fear. Species that had looked at humanity with friendly tolerance now approached with caution. They had seen what the young species could become when threatened. He met with representatives of the Ketheri Collective, a neutral species that had watched the war with growing worry. Their ambassador was a being made of living crystal whose light patterns showed emotion. Ambassador Carter, the galaxy questions what humanity has become. Your species was welcomed as builders and dreamers. Now you are feared as destroyers.
Ow.
Daniel chose his words with care. We are what we always were. The galaxy simply did not see all of us before. The doomsday systems remain active. Your military grows. These are not the actions of a species at peace. They're the actions of a species that has learned peace must be protected. Daniel's voice carried no apology. We did not choose this war. We offered friendship and were answered with invasion. The galaxy should think about that before judging our response. The Ketheri ambassador's light shifted to something like sadness. You speak of lessons learned. But what lesson do you want others to take? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. That humanity is not a species to be dismissed. Not a species to be threatened. Not a species that will quietly accept extinction. He paused. But also that we remember what we were before, and that we would rather build than destroy if given the choice. Your actions say otherwise. My actions say that we will do whatever is necessary to survive long enough to make that choice. Daniel stood. The Valdorian Empire learned what happens when humanity is pushed to the edge. I hope no other power needs that lesson shown to them. As Daniel left the meeting, he thought about how far he had come from the young diplomat who had first arrived on alien worlds with nothing but hope and words. That man still existed somewhere, buried under layers of necessity and pain. Whether he would ever come back, Daniel could not say. He returned to his office and found a message waiting. It was from his daughter Lisa, who lived on one of the colonies that had been saved. The message included a picture of her with her daughter, Daniel's granddaughter, a little girl named Samantha who had just turned 5. The image hit Daniel harder than any battle report. This was why he had done everything. This was what he had protected. A little girl who would grow up in a galaxy that now knew better than to threaten humanity. But what kind of galaxy would that be? One ruled by fear rather than understanding. One where humanity was respected not for its dreams, but for its capacity for destruction? Catherine entered with more reports. Sir, the Valdorian withdrawal is complete. All 17 worlds are back under human control. Casualties. Final count is 812 million. Mostly civilian. Daniel closed his eyes. 812 million people. Dead because an ancient empire had miscalculated. Dead because he had not found the right words to prevent the war. Dead because humanity had to prove a point. Catherine, I want you to start a new project. A memorial. What kind of memorial? One that remembers everyone. The dead, the survivors. The worlds that burned and the ones that held. Daniel opened his eyes. And one that reminds the galaxy why this happened. Not as a threat. As a warning. A warning about what? Daniel looked at the image of his granddaughter. A warning about the cost of underestimating any species. A warning about what happens when you force peace-loving people to become warriors. A warning that the galaxy would do well to remember. Catherine nodded. I will begin the plans. After she left, Daniel sat alone with his thoughts. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the man who had won it was not the man who had started it. That man, the hopeful diplomat, was gone. In his place stood someone harder, someone who had learned that peace sometimes required the threat of total destruction. Someone who had looked into the darkness and found it looking back. The question now was simple. Could humanity find its way back to the light? Or had the war changed them forever into something their ancestors would not recognize? Daniel did not know the answer, but he knew he would spend the rest of his life trying to find it. For his daughter, for his granddaughter, for the 800 million who had died so that humanity could survive, he owed them that much. He owed them everything. 20 years had passed since the war ended. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood at the dedication of the Memorial of Stars, a vast space station built at the same location where both treaties had been signed. 17 beacons of light represented the worlds that had been threatened. 800 million smaller lights honored the dead. At 72 years old, Daniel had become a living legend. People called him the Diplomat of Fury, the voice of consequences. The man who had changed from bridge builder to warrior and somehow back again. The Valdorian Empire had never recovered its former power. Their reputation had been broken by defeat at the hands of a younger species. Catherine Walsh, now Ambassador Walsh with her own achievements, stood beside him. The Valdorian group has arrived. Counselor Kethmer wants to speak with you privately. Daniel nodded slowly. Kethmer had survived the war crimes trials. Role had been small enough to avoid execution, but shameful enough to end his political career. That he had come here, to this memorial, meant something. The old Valdorian waited in a small viewing room. His scales were gray with age, his once proud posture now bent. When Daniel entered, Kethmer bowed low, a sign of respect that would have been impossible before the war. Ambassador Carter, I am grateful you agreed to see me, Counselor. Daniel took a seat across from his former enemy. You have traveled far for this meeting. I wish to see what humanity has built. Kethmer pointed toward the memorial visible through the window. And to understand what we created when we made war on you. What do you think you created? Kethmer was quiet for a moment. The Valdorian Empire ruled for 10,000 years through strength and certainty. We were the greater power, unquestioned. Your species taught us that strength alone is not enough. We taught you that there are costs to aggression. Yes, Kethmer's voice carried real thought, but more than that, we taught ourselves that we had become lazy, proud, blind to possibilities we had stopped imagining. A young species, given every reason to give up, instead became something we could not defeat. Daniel considered this. It became something we did not want to be, and yet you built this. Kethmer pointed to the memorial. It's not a monument to victory, a monument to loss, to memory, to the hope that such things need not happen again. We build because building is what we do. Destruction was a necessity, not a choice. Is it still? Kethmer asked quietly. The Doomsday platforms remain active. Your military is larger than ours now. You have become what you once feared. Daniel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the lights honoring the dead. 20 years ago, I told your Supreme Counselor that peace could be rebuilt on real respect. That offer still stands. Can you truly trust us again? No. Daniel turned back to face the old Valdorian. But my granddaughter can. She is studying to be a diplomat, preparing to build bridges I once built and then burned. The next generation does not carry my scars. They carry my hope. Rose slowly, his old body straightening with effort. Then perhaps something good came from our greatest mistake. Perhaps. Daniel held out his hand. A human sign of peace. The universe is big enough for all of us, counselor. That was true before the war. It is still true now. Kethmer took the offered hand, his clawed grip gentle. Ambassador Carter, the Valdorian people have a new saying. It came after the war, among the younger ones who grew up in defeat. Do not wake the humans. Daniel almost smiled. We would rather sleep peacefully. It was always what we wanted. I know that now. Kethmer let go of his hand. I wish my people had known it before. After the Valdorian left, Daniel stood alone at the window, watching. The memorial lights move in patterns that spelled out names. The names of worlds saved. It's the names of those who died to save them. Catherine found him there an hour later, Ambassador. The dedication ceremony is about to begin. In a moment, Daniel's voice was thoughtful.
Catherine, do you think we made
the right choices during the war? I think we survived to ask that question. That is more than the Valdorians wanted to give us. It's true enough. Daniel turned from the window. But survival is not the only measure of success. The question is whether we survived as something worth saving. Look at what we have built since the war. Catherine gestured broadly. The alliance networks, the aid programs, the cultural exchanges. We did not become monsters, Daniel. We became a species that refuses to die, but also refuses to stop growing. And the weapons? The military? The plans that still sit in secret files? Assurance. Catherine's voice was firm, not identity. There is a difference. Daniel nodded slowly. I hope you are right. I hope the next generation remembers why we built those weapons but never needs to use them. They will, because you will tell them. The dedication ceremony drew representatives from over 40 species, more than had ever gathered in one place in galactic history. Daniel gave the main speech, his voice carrying to all the assembled groups. 20 years ago, humanity faced extinction. An ancient empire decided we had grown too numerous, too successful, too threatening. They expected us to submit, expected fear to control our response. He paused, looking out at faces from across the galaxy. They were wrong. Humanity responded not with fear, but with fury. Not with submission, but with total resistance. We taught the galaxy a lesson it did not expect, that our young species carries fire in its soul. Fire that can warm or consume depending on how we are treated. The fire is not our only gift. We also carry hope, the stubborn belief that tomorrow can be better than today, that bridges burned can be rebuilt, that enemies can become friends if given the chance. Daniel's voice softened. This memorial honors both truths about humanity. The lights you see represent our dead, those who gave everything so our species could survive. But they also represent our future, the children who will inherit a galaxy that knows what humanity can become when pushed too far. He looked directly at the Valdorian group, Kethmer among them. We do not want conflict. We never did. But we will not accept extinction. This is humanity's message to the universe. Approach us with respect, and you will find no better friends. Approach us with aggression, and you will find no more determined enemies. The choice has always been yours. We hope you choose wisely. As the ceremony ended, Daniel slipped away to a quiet viewing deck. A young woman approached. Dark hair and serious eyes that reminded him of his daughter, his granddaughter Samantha. Carter, now 25 years old, and already speaking 3 alien languages. Grandfather, that was a beautiful speech. It was a warning dressed as a memorial, Daniel replied, but thank you. Samantha stood beside him, looking out at the stars. Do you think there will be another war? There is always another war somewhere. The question is whether we will be part of it. Daniel put his arm around her shoulders. Your generation has a chance to build something better. To prove that the fury we showed was an exception, not a rule. No pressure, Samantha said with a small smile. Daniel laughed, a real sound that had become rare since the war. Your grandmother used to say that humanity's greatest strength is not our anger. It is our ability to choose what we become. What do you think we should become? Daniel thought about the question as he had thought about few others. Something that honors both our ability to create and our ability to destroy. something that remembers the fire but keeps it controlled until truly needed. He looked at his granddaughter with something like hope. Something like you. Samantha smiled. I will do my best. That is all anyone can ask. Daniel turned back to the memorial, the lights of the dead shining across the void. That is all anyone ever has to give. As grandfather and granddaughter stood together, watching the memorial turn against the background of endless stars, humanity continued its journey, not as innocent bridge builders, not as ruthless destroyers, but as something new. A species that had looked into the darkness and chosen to build bridges over it anyway. The galaxy would remember, and humanity would continue, as it always had, reaching for stars it could not yet touch, carrying fire and hope in equal measure. The story of Ambassador Daniel Carter would be told for generations. The diplomat who became a warrior, the warrior who became a builder again. The man who showed the galaxy both faces of humanity and asked them to choose which one they would see. Most species chose wisely after that. The ones who did not learn the same lesson the Valdorians had learned: do not wake the humans.